What's rich people crap that poor people haven't heard of? My father-in-law works in construction with decades of experience under his belt. He's been contracted to work with a local billionaire for a number of years. One year, while my FIL was out hunting, a massive flood shut down the highways in my area, and he couldn't make it home. It was awful. Acres and acres of farmland were destroyed. Local lodges cleared out rooms for travelers who were stuck, but my FIL decided to give up his room and just use his camping gear in the bush. He was supposed to work for this rich guy the following day, but obviously he couldn't make it in, so he gave him a call explaining the situation. The story goes that the rich guy was straight up asking, "Where are you?" And within a few hours, a helicopter arrived to extract him from the area. All the other travelers saw the helicopter arrive and thought it was a general rescue, so they started lining up with their suitcases. Little did they know that the helicopter was there only to get my FIL out. Out of nowhere, basically a dirty bushman, my FIL, emerged from the woods and hopped into the helicopter. Now that's some real screw-it money right there. Basically, screw the rest of you, this man has work to do. Story 2. I was involved with coordinating a New York press tour for Bill Gates back in the day. Every moment of his time was scheduled down to the minute because his time was so valuable. In addition to his personal security, we hired police, military, and special services personnel to coordinate Bill's travel route. I've never moved through Manhattan so fast. We went through back doors and walkways that avoided the general public and buildings and took us right to his interview locations. Every step was mapped out and someone was always there waiting for us just to open an unmarked door that would lead yet to another shortcut. Our unmarked black SUV was always waiting with the engine running and we were quickly whisked from place to place. That's the day that I learned that the most valuable thing to a billionaire isn't more money, it's time. Story 3. 12 years ago, my wife's uncle was working for a UAE sheikh to set up some telecom towers and travel to Dubai. He and a few other guys were given a desert safari experience along with their colleagues. While coming back to their hotel in Dubai, they were each dropped off individually in spanking new Porsche 911 Turbos, 7 or 8 of them. The sheikh came to visit them the next day. During the meeting, one of the uncle's colleagues praised the 911 to the sheikh. The next moment, the sheikh said, "Take it with you to your country, it's yours." The car was home delivered to the colleague in his home country with all duties and taxes fully paid. Her uncle, flabbergasted, thought he should be the one to have praised it first. Story 4. I was doing some AV work in a customer's home that had a kind of operations manager running the household. Her job was basically to schedule and oversee all home maintenance, from housekeeping, landscaping, and the pool service to us coming in to replace a TV in his home gym. She flexed a bit by telling us she was instructed that if a household expense cost less than $5,000, she wasn't to bother him. She was simply to cut a check for it. On our way home from the job, I googled the guy and discovered he had made something like $53 million that year, and it was only summer. He was also due a fat bonus by the end of the year, indicating that wasn't even the full extent of his income. He was stupid wealthy. Story 5. Oh yeah, this is my area. I went to elite private schools, though we weren't rich. The ultra-wealthy people I hung out with would be in the kitchen reminiscing as a family about the best fish and chips they ever had. That conversation would turn into a call to their pilot and a flight to Brighton Beach the next day. Any conversation could end up with them being in a different part of the world within 36 hours. I literally saw one family travel to France just to pick up butter. Yes, butter. Their private plane was like a car to them. They probably spent well over $100,000 in travel based solely on how good the butter was in France. They'd get on the plane at night and wake up in Europe. I heard classmates complain about spending a week on a massive yacht in the Caribbean because it was boring. They were upset they couldn't go shopping in New York because they were stuck on a yacht. Their dad's response was that their plane was in the area and they could go shopping in New York whenever they wanted. So it was a vacation inside of a vacation because their original vacation wasn't exactly what they wanted. Story 6. I work in the luxury travel industry and there is a lot of incredible stuff here that you've probably never heard of. There are invite-only luxury travel collections like exclusive resorts. Think of it like a country club, but for travel. You pay a membership fee up front. Packages typically range between $100,000 and $250K. Once you are a member, you have access to a massive network of ultra-luxury rental properties around the world with basically guaranteed availability. Want a penthouse apartment in Monaco for the Formula One weekend? A ski-in chalet in Aspen over the Christmas and New Year's week? A luxury apartment near the Super Bowl of the World Cup final? Your personal travel concierge will take care of all that. Other services include things like travel nannies for your kids. Some exclusive operators, such as White Desert, can fly you on a private jet to an ice runway at their camp in Antarctica and then, optionally, onwards to the South Pole. Prices start around $110,000 per person. You can also charter a luxury polar expedition ship for about $2 million to $5 million for a 10-day expedition around Svalbard or Antarctica. There's also a helicopter charter on demand. Say you own a mega yacht with a helipad, but you don't want the hassle of helicopter ownership. However, you still want full helicopter service on your yacht for the 3 to 5 times a year that you are actually on it. There are companies that will match you with a helicopter, a pilot, and crew on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Story 7. Independent watch brands. The majority of people know Rolex, Omega, and Tudor. They are good watches, but they are essentially mass-produced luxury watches. Then you have the Pateks, the APs, JLC, FP Journe, GP, and my personal favorite, Vacheron Constantin. These are not as well known by the masses, but they are recognized by watch enthusiasts across different tax brackets. Then you go deeper and start seeing independent watchmakers like Philippe Dufour, Hajime Asaoka, Valtulianien, and Grubel Forcé, just to name a few. These guys release what are essentially limited editions. And I know, some of you are gonna be up in the comments telling me I mispronounced these names. Let me just tell you in advance, I'm not a watch guy, but I'm sorry if I messed up your favorite watch brand's name. I didn't mean it. Onwards to the next story, please. Story 8. I went to an amazing Miami penthouse once that had multiple staircases brought in just so the previous owner could pick which one they liked best. It was insane. I went to Paloma Picasso's house and she literally had a tile trim around the majority of the house made of tiles painted by her father. She also had a bathroom made of mirrors from a Russian palace, a lamp made of a globe used by popes for centuries, and a cot used by soldiers from the French Revolution used as decor. It was so understatedly extravagant that my jaw was on the floor. Story 9. I studied abroad in China. I went clubbing with some locals I met there, and one guy who drove his gold-wrapped Maserati to the club and proceeded to get really intoxicated, so we took a cab home together. I met up with him the next night at a bar and asked him if he got to his car. He said, no, I was too hungover today to go get it. I told him the valet guy said if it wasn't picked up by the next day, it would be towed. He said, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just go buy a new one. It's not worth the hassle dealing with the tow company. He laughed, I laughed, thinking he was joking. I was talking to one of his friends later and told them about a conversation to which his friend said, oh yeah, he's done that before, he'll have a new one by next week. And my jaw hit the floor. This guy was completely serious that it was too hassle to go pick up his impounded Maserati, so he was just going to buy a new one. The rich in China are rich. Story 10. Poor people haven't heard of the ultra-wealthy. I used to bartend at a nice seafood place. It was a good spot, but not over the top. This dude used to come in once a week during lunch and have a kettle of clams and some calamari. We talked about all kinds of stuff, but nothing particularly important. One day he told me he had just gotten back from the Baja 500 in Mexico. I asked if it was cool. He said it was. He told me about driving the course and whatnot. I laughed and said I thought he just went to watch. He said he owned a team and had been doing it for years. I commented that it was cool and sounded expensive. He asked, do you know who I am? I said, yeah, you're Gary. He told me to check out his last name as he handed me his credit card to pay. It didn't mean anything to me, so I told him I didn't get it. He explained that it was the same last name as the college sports arena in town. I chuckled and said, yeah, sure. Turns out his dad was a cable guru and he is some kind of crazy billionaire. Story 11. This isn't per se an activity normal folks haven't heard of, but how these activities were achieved is mind-blowing. One of my friends is a friend of a billionaire's son. One time, they flew to the city where I was living by private jet. We all hung out, had a fun night, and then went to his dad's place in that particular city. Now this sounds dumb, but the one thing I remember about the apartment was that it was, and still is, the first apartment I'd ever been to with 4 separate floors, all of which had at least 10-foot ceilings. The next day, we all woke up and over breakfast, he mentioned they were going to have the jet pit stop at a beach town so they could relax the hangover away. The beach town was on the opposite side of the country. Their SUV arrived just as we finished breakfast and they were gone as fast as they had arrived. They were back in their and my hometown by 5 p.m. that night after a few hours on the beach. I walked half a mile to the metro and took the 40-minute ride back to my tiny apartment outside of the city. It was a fun time and he was super generous and paid for everything, but I'm still shook by how insane those 18 hours were. Story 12. My buddy did home AV installs in mega mansions for a while. The coolest things we saw were heated driveways and walkways for ice and snow, an in-home cigar bar with a specialized exhaust system and multiple temperature-controlled wine vaults, each set to different temperatures for different types of wine. We also saw a 2-lane bowling alley, an indoor shooting range / weapons room, and even an indoor half-ice hockey rink. The craziest thing, though, was a Nantucket homeowner who had a yacht that he never actually sailed. He drank his coffee and read the newspaper on the deck every day, and then he left. He snowbirded to Florida so the yacht was crewed all year long, and the crew would sail the boat down to Florida whenever he flew there. Story 13. Think about the amount of people needed to actually make their lives tick. Air crews, yacht crews, housekeepers, family offices in multiple countries, and so on. They might spend millions of dollars a year just on the staff they have on hand, staff they never really use to look after things they might never use or use only very rarely. Then there is the absolute isolation they have when it comes to understanding normal people. After a few decades, the disconnect becomes so massive that they are basically, functionally, mentally ill toddlers with a big stick. Story 14. Poor people pay Social Security tax on every bit of money they make, but if you make enough, you only pay the tax on the first $184,500 of income, the 2026 cap. If the U.S. simply removed that cap, we would not run out of Social Security and people wouldn't have to work until they pass away. Most people didn't even know about the cap because they don't realize it exists until they earn more than that amount and suddenly have a bigger paycheck than they'd expected. If the 95% of people who don't make that much knew about it, they'd support candidates and bills to remove the cap. Doing so would generate trillions of dollars over 10 years, helping people retire earlier and more comfortably. Story 15. My dad built estate homes for a lot of wealthy people. One in particular was very old money. He watched a movie that had a scene with a Jeep where the characters hit up a tree using the vehicle's winch. He thought that was hilarious, so he bought a Jeep but never actually drove it. He kept it parked at the gatehouse with all his other high-end stuff, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, and a 1923 Woody he was very proud of, all just sitting outside. My dad, just joking, said he should build a 4-car heated garage down by the main house where his wife had a garden. He asked my dad what it would cost to build. This was the late 90s, and my dad, again, jokingly, said $500,000. Then the man just said, okay, build it. He never saw a plan. He had no notion of building anything. $500,000? Yeah, man, go for it. Story 16. I want to say this. I'm glad that rich people spend quote-unquote stupid money on quote-unquote stupid things. I recall hearing about a rich divorcee claiming that she needs $15,000 a month for her dog to go to a doggy spa and that her rich ex-husband needs to pay for it. People were saying how terrible she is. Well, imagine instead that there was a pet spa owner who was making $15,000 a month and paying his 3 employees with that lady's ridiculous pet spa money. He's sending his kids to college and his employees have full health insurance all because Fifi needs to be pampered. When Kim Kardashian spends $10,000 on some stupid thing, I say that's awesome because someone got paid $10,000 for selling her that thing. You rent a limo to drive you to the office? Well, that's awesome for the limo driver, thanks. So don't be jealous or mad because some rich guy is spending money. Be happy that he's taking that money out of his stock portfolio and throwing it into the local economy. No, you don't need a personal chef, but dang, what a great gig for that chef. Story 17. I work in a family office, and for starters, the fact that wealthy people have a family office is a surprise for some people. The real surprise, though, is the sheer amount of work that goes into managing the world of a wealthy individual. From home maintenance, travel planning, legal work, investment research, etc., the wealthy individuals are doing very little for themselves and have people who do that work for them and then report back with ideas or feedback. Anytime a billionaire talks about how much they spend in business meetings, the reason they are able to do it is because all of the other work is handled. Additionally, most of those meetings are just status updates on what is going on in their life. Story 18. Kaleidoscape is a movie streamer like your Roku, except the players start at $2,000. Movies purchased there also cost more than on other services, and they don't participate in shared library schemes like Movies Anywhere. For all this expense, however, your home theater will have playback quality closer to the cinema than anything else on the market. Not even Blu-ray discs are on the same level as Kaleidoscape. If you have the money and are spending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a home theater, it's just what you do. The quality improvement is probably not something 99.9% of people will ever notice, but there's no reason to cheap out after all those other expenses. Story 19. A while back, I did an editorial photo shoot of a rich guy's new mansion. He is in the top 10 wealthiest people in his country. The mansion had one of those fancy roundabouts in front of it like you see in The Gentleman or James Bond movies. He said he could bring out some cars to make the images of the house look more lived in. He then stated that he could bring over a Bentley, a Rolls Royce, an Aston Martin, or a Ferrari, but I should decide on the color. He had multiple colors of every car. The way he said this wasn't to brag or show off, it was just a boring fact to him. He genuinely wanted to help by bringing any color of Rolls Royce I wanted for the picture. He also had an energy drink faucet in the kitchen, but yeah, who hasn't? Story 20. Private healthcare, but not the kind Americans are used to. No, your doctor will show up to your house if you need a procedure. They have a private hospital for that. Only other rich people who pay that practice money can use. And you'll recover from surgery in your house with all the medical equipment brought to your house and round-the-clock coverage in your house. When you have this, pretty much the only non-emergency situation where you'd have to go to a hospital where the poors go is if you need an MRI and you're not in a wealthy city. In the wealthy cities, I hear they have private MRIs too. Story 21. I work for a billionaire family and I see incredible things on a daily basis. There are small details like having separate hallways for the service staff, sensor-controlled lighting so they never have to touch a light switch, and TV lifts that rise out of the floor. Then there's the more extreme stuff like me taking their 2 dogs on a private charter from Florida to Europe. They own hundreds of millions of dollars in properties and several planes, and they haven't driven themselves in years. The cleaning staff even drives around in supplied Mercedes-Benz GLS's SUVs because the family doesn't want ugly cars parked around their houses. I have personally spent over $700,000 on a single light fixture. Despite the excess, the family is absolutely amazing and takes care of their employees so well. Almost all of the staff members receive annual bonuses between $50,000 and $100,000. Story 22. My uncle worked at a large liquor store called the Liquor Barn. Every week, a van would show up from one of the local horse farms and pick up a pallet of bottled water. It was for the wife to bathe in. It was about $1,000 a week just for bath water. Then one week, he noticed they went from 1-liter bottles to 20-ounce bottles, which cost about 20% more for the same amount of water. He asked why they changed and found out that the woman had discovered some of her staff were taking the half-used bottles and drinking them. So she switched to smaller bottles so there wouldn't be any leftovers that the staff could use. Generational wealthy people are very greedy and very stupid and very mean. Story 23. While attending SDSU, I babysat and nannied for a wealthy couple in La Jolla, though I had my own apartment. Their son was away at college and the mother was a socialite who was out many nights while her husband, the president of a company, was away on business travel. Even when he was home, they went out most nights. I put that sweet girl to bed at least 5 nights a week. They even went on vacations without her. I helped her with her homework, Girl Scout badges, play dates, and much more. I was expected to be available 24/7, but I couldn't complain because I knew the cash in the white envelope would be beyond my wildest dreams. I could have written the nanny diaries because everything in that book was spot on. I love that little girl, but not the mom. People like that are so used to getting their way, they act like they've never even heard of the word no. They eventually asked me to move with them to a state on the East Coast that has 12 miles of beachable housing, their home being one of them. I was offered my own apartment, which was essentially a casita. My answer was, sorry, but no. She told me to leave immediately and she never ever called me again. Story 24. I read this on an old forum about personal assistants to big shots in LA. A big shot executive or artist travels to Europe for work or a vacation for a week or two, but they don't take any luggage with them on the trip. Instead, a personal assistant goes to their penthouse, packs up everything needed for a 2-week stay in a ritzy hotel, and sends it via express courier to the hotel overnight. This is sent along with photos, instructions, and specific preferences. Someone at the hotel then unpacks everything into the suite where the person will be staying. That way, when the rich person arrives, their clothes are already hung up in the closet, their personal toiletries are already in the bathroom, and their personal office is laid out with the desk exactly the same as it is at home. The rich person just has to waltz onto the plane with only the clothes on their back, then walk into the hotel as if they are heading into their own personal residence. And if you're enjoying the video too, yeah, right? Rich folk? Man. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 25. Many people don't know this, but many smaller airports have VIP lounges, and I'm not talking about the regular first-class lounge. You arrive at a separate gate or entrance and simply give your passport and luggage to a concierge. They manage everything while you wait in a beautiful room with waiter service, sofas where you can take a nap, a small office, and a private bathroom. After some time, they bring you your boarding pass and drive you directly to the plane in a car or on an electric vehicle. I experienced something like this in May, Seychelles. On the side of the airport, there is a villa with 2 or 3 private lounges where you exit through a side gate. But there are more. You can even buy access to a few European VIP lounges for a few $100s. Sometimes they don't even check your hand luggage. It's crazy, but true. Story 26. There are things priced as screw you, you're too poor just to keep millionaires out, priced so that only billionaires can afford them. I remember an island in Hawaii that had a resort with something like a $10,000 chair rental. To us, that's insane. To a millionaire, that's real money. But to a billionaire, that's less than the price of a candy bar. I have a billionaire as an acquaintance. He used to be my boss. He's not at the Musk or Bezos level, but I've worked out that one Ken buck is roughly equivalent to 10,000 USD. So that $10,000 chair is just one Ken buck. It's worth it to them to keep the riffraff, the mere millionaires, away. I'm a car guy. A Bugatti Veyron needs a new set of $60,000 tires for a high-speed run. For me, that's a couple of years of college for my kids, but for him, that's only 6 Ken bucks, the equivalent of a latte. Story 27. My father likes to buy older FU money homes, 10,000 plus square feet, and update or flip them. The thing that always gets me is how pretty much all of them have low-profile toilets with a landline phone right next to them. I just don't get it. Why would I want to be closer to the ground when pooping? And I totally understand playing on a smartphone while on the toilet, but a landline? How often do people actually have to place a phone call while using the bathroom? I don't even take phone calls on my cell phone while I'm in there, let alone an old corded phone. When I mention this to people, their general response is always, wait, what? Story 28. I don't know if this qualifies, but back in 2001, I had been working for AOL for a few years and started making AOL money. They were a huge deal at the time. They gave all employees stock and it increased in value rapidly. Having money was new to me and I decided to buy a new car. I was driving a Dodge Neon, a cheap car at the time, and on a whim, I stopped at the Mercedes dealer near the AOL headquarters. I got out of my car dressed like a homeless guy and stopped to look at a red hardtop convertible. A salesperson walked out with the keys and said, "Take it home for the weekend." I was stunned. He asked, "You work at AOL, right?" I said, "Yep." He didn't ask for anything, no license, nothing. He insisted that I take it to the point that it freaked me out, so I said, "Maybe later," and left. I mentioned this to a coworker, and they explained that if you want to look at a car, you just call the dealer and ask them to bring it to the AOL office. It turned out to be true. They knew you had money, and it was standard practice to say, "Bring me this expensive thing," and people would just do it, worrying about the paperwork and payments later. I grew up poor, and this event has stayed with me ever since. One other thing, if you have money, you can park anywhere you want. The cost of parking tickets is inconsequential. You just park wherever and pay the tickets at the end of the month. Los Angeles has a lot of 1 hour maximum parking slots. For rich people, those are just all-day parking spots. Story 29. I have a friend from a wealthy, old money family. She has a crappy credit card that she rarely uses. When I asked her why she used that card specifically, she said, "Oh, I have almost no credit history and don't really have the time or the craps to shop around for a card with good rates." I asked her how someone of her wealth could have a low credit score or history, and she said it's because whenever she wants something, she simply texts the family's financial advisor, and that person makes it happen. She buys her clothes at unheard-of boutiques that only take appointments, and they let her walk out of the door because they know exactly who to send the bill to. When she gets a new car, which happens every couple of years, she just goes into the dealership, picks out what she likes, and tells the family financial guy. The car gets delivered a day later. She doesn't bother with paperwork or payment. What's interesting to me is that over time, I've learned she is financially illiterate and has very little choice in how she pays for things. One time, I was at a holiday party with her family and I made a joke about her credit card. Later, her sister pulled me aside and told me to keep that information on the down low because her father, who is the gatekeeper of most of the family fortune, demands that none of his children use a credit card or any payment service that charges fees or interest. In his view, that crap is for the poors. Groceries, household affairs, utility bills, Amazon orders, and so on are mostly handled by her personal assistant. Everything else is handled almost instantly by the financial guy. My friend is a somewhat modest consumer in terms of quantity and does very little online shopping. She has surprisingly few things for someone with her budget, but every few months she'll drop 10,000 euro before lunch at just a couple of boutiques and it will all fit in one medium-sized bag. Story 30. The owners of the McDonald's franchise I used to work for would host an award ceremony every year to honor the top-performing managers. All managers from every store of every franchise they own were invited to this fancy hall at a golf course, which was also owned by those very same owners. What I later found out was that the award ceremony was actually more of a secret evaluation event. The owners had a specific type that they preferred for general manager promotions. They would use the ceremony as a way of physically observing the top employees to see who matched that type, and they gave no real crap about employee appreciation. It was basically a glorified, sleazy way of window shopping for servants to promote. Story 31. I was the GM of a world-class, privately owned restaurant. We had a few extremely wealthy regulars, one of whom passed away one night. The next morning, the owner called me and told me we were closing for the next week so that my chefs and service staff could feed and cater at the home of the deceased. This was so the household staff could observe Shiva with the family. We operated out of 2 of the 4 kitchens in the house and catered 3 meals a day, plus any other requests for a week. Also, during that week, the family had a refrigerated truck in the back where all of the flower arrangements were kept as they arrived, hundreds of them from people sending condolences. Another staff member switched out the flowers throughout the house daily so that every arrangement and accompanying note could be seen and read. Story 32. It's not that wild, but I was working a job through a guy's property who won some lottery, like hundreds of millions of dollars. Super nice guy. He had an entire garage, more like a small warehouse of cars. I don't really know much about cars, but they were really nice. He had an entire mechanic's garage with all the tools. He told me he had whatever specialized mechanic was needed for whatever car came whenever something was wrong. He also built an entire full-blown commercial car wash behind the garage for his cars. I've never heard of anyone owning a commercial car wash for private use like that. Story 33. This isn't exactly on point, but I briefly worked as an advisor for a guy on properly shutting down some businesses he owned, and I mostly worked out of his home office. One day I came to work and he opened the door all angry because he had street workers over the night before and those freaking heels ruined my hardwood floor. It wasn't actually that bad, just a couple of dings that I didn't even notice until he pointed them out. Regardless, he had a company come out the next day to resurface the whole goddamn floor. Side note, the guy loved his Amex black card because of how easy it was to contest the charge. He was such a little crap. He had gobs of cash, but he would spend a ton of money at the clubs and then reverse the charges. I think Amex eventually dropped him over it. Story 34. I was in the SF Bay Area working for Silicon Valley billionaires. I was sent to this mansion in the middle of a mountain pass. The GPS said I had arrived, but my instructions said to call when I reached the gate to get access. I was then led along a pathway between the hills for an hour on a private road. When I finally thought I had arrived, it was only the guard shack. Beyond that was a small downtown-style area made of different buildings. One was for art, one was for exercising, and one for storage, but they were all giant mansions and there were many of them. They had iPods or iPhones as an interface in each room to turn on the lights, adjust the heat, or open the windows. The guy leading me around explained that the owner has a team of chefs that travels with the family. They spend $1 million monthly on tea imported from abroad. They have an indoor Olympic-sized pool that leaks, and instead of fixing the leak, they just have it constantly refilled. They also imported pallets of Voss water in glass bottles, nothing else. They had no neighbors. Story 35. Asset-backed loans. Wealthy individuals often use a specific strategy called buy, borrow, pass away. This approach leverages asset-backed loans to build wealth and fund a lifestyle while legally minimizing or eliminating taxes. Here's a breakdown of how it works. First, buy. Accumulate appreciating assets. The first step is to buy assets that grow in value over time, such as stocks, real estate, or private businesses. The goal, focus on unrealized gains. As long as you don't sell the asset, you don't owe any capital gains tax, even if the asset's value grows from $1 million to $100 million. Second, borrow. Use a line of credit for cash instead of selling stocks to buy a yacht or a second home, which would trigger a massive tax bill. The wealthy take out an asset-backed loan, specifically a securities-backed line of credit, S-block, or a Lombard loan. Tax-free cash. In most jurisdictions, loan proceeds are not considered income, so they are not taxable. Low interest. Because the loan is backed by millions of dollars in liquid stocks, the bank offers a very low interest rate, often much lower than a standard mortgage or personal loan. Arbitrage. If their investments grow at 8% per year and their loan interest is only 4%, they are effectively making money on the bank's capital while keeping their own wealth invested and growing. Third, pass away. The step up in basis. This is the final crucial step for the strategy used to pass wealth to heirs. The reset. When the owner passes away, many tax codes, like in the US, allow for a step up in basis. This means the cost of the asset is reset to its market value on the day of passing. Wiping out taxes. If an heir sells the asset immediately to pay off the accumulated loans, they pay zero capital gains tax. For tax purposes, there is no gain between the day they inherit it and the day they sold it. Story 36. My dad lives in the capital city of a Southeast Asian country. The city has color coding and license plate number coding to help with traffic congestion. My dad couldn't be bothered with those rules, so he bought a different car for every day of the week. He really enjoys sleeping in, so here are the tasks he hired staff for when my siblings and I were school-aged. A nanny for each child, a cook, a scullery maid, a housemaid, a washerwoman, a driver to take us to and from school, a major domo to manage all the staff, a male staff member to help the female staff with heavy lifting, or to help my dad when he felt like fiddling with his cars. He is a quote-unquote car guy. Private tutors for when my siblings and I were failing classes. We also had armed security for a few years after our house was broken into while we were on vacation and the maids were held at knife point. Like many other wealthy people, he often told us we were poor because he constantly compared what we had to his much richer billionaire and politician friends. It wasn't until I left home, moved to a Western country, and reached my 30s as a middle-class individual that I realized how privileged I was growing up. I think I was in denial for a long time. A more recent ridiculous development is that he and my stepmom built my little brother a recording studio in their basement and furnished it with all the instruments so he can produce music as a hobby. This happened after he was supposed to be majoring in business, then changed his major to music without telling our folks. They only found out when they got the tuition bill. Story 37. My family owns an island in international waters. I hope that doesn't make me sound like stuck-up scum. It's been in the family for 5 generations, and we have had some pretty crazy parties that would make Gatsby jealous. When I was younger, we would sometimes shoot fireworks at a neighboring island, ride boats down to a bar in a nearby bay to steal liquor, and yet the police and Coast Guard never once stepped foot on our island. They would circle around in their boats and exchange words or threats with my father, aunts, and uncles, but they never actually came ashore. This wasn't due to the geography or the international waters, but because my grandfather was such a well-respected politician. We also thought they were intimidated because my father and uncle were both Navy SEALs. The police were always told they were somewhere on the island, intoxicated and suffering from PTSD. Don't judge me for sharing. I was just the innocent kid caught up in a messed-up mafia-like family. Story 38. The only rich person I know personally is insanely wealthy and does classic rich person crap like living in the penthouse of a hotel in Boston or spending a few months sailing down the coast on his boat. In fact, it's the poor stuff he does that is so weird to me. He's technically related to us, but he knows we're all poor AF compared to him, so he tries really hard not to be the rich guy. I remember we were at a really shoddy dive bar in our town once and they burned his wings. He just said, "Don't worry about it," and ate them. It was so funny to me. You could have just bought the bar and fired the waitress and she had absolutely no idea. Story 39. It's not just the big fancy toys, but the niche interests that can be catered to, things you might not even know you can buy. I'm in the gun industry and there is a strange world of antiques that goes beyond just being old. There's a phrase, book gun and its cousin, book knife. If you have a scholarly work that forms the Bible of an interest, like a definitive collector's guide, and that guide has photos in it, The subjects and artifacts pictured are henceforth known as book guns or book knives. These aren't just example pieces, they are normally cataloged in the archives of museums and rarely come up for sale. Sometimes a museum is only holding the gun in a form of trust while it remains owned by a private collector. For example, the Colt 1873 Single Action Army (SAA) used by Sheriff Pat Garrett to end Billy the Kid went up for auction and was won for a staggering amount, over $6 million, by an anonymous buyer. I knew a guy who was wealthy enough to toy with this world. He bought an original Springfield Model 1816 musket in its original flintlock configuration, which was incredibly hard to find since most were converted to caplock for the Civil War. All of these antiques and book guns are in a tight closed loop. Normally, it's just a matter of old men leaving these to their children, who may never sell them or even show them to the public. A related term is screen time. Studios normally don't use their own guns because they own little to no props. Instead, they rent from suppliers with dedicated warehouses. If a gun is used in a big-budget movie, it's common for enthusiasts to make an offer to buy it. I believe Clint Eastwood actually bought a few after the outlawed Josie Wales. Rarely will a screen time gun ever come up for sale because they are reused for hundreds of movies. But when one does, it's a big deal. For instance, the owner of the famous Davy Crockett beef shoot rifle, an actual 1830s antique, reportedly refused an offer from Phil Collins, who is a massive collector of Alamo artifacts. You can buy a new yacht, but some things truly are not for sale. Story 40. My company's accountant was leaving for another job and I asked him what was done with the weirder things he'd seen in his time. He'd worked for Saudi royalty in London. Sheets on every bed disposed of each week if no one was using the residence, every day when in use. Housekeepers made bank on selling them at markets, really expensive sheets. Prince's guy turns up and hands him an envelope with cash for bonuses and just trusts him to hand it out appropriately. No one had stayed at the residence that year, so only 20,000 euro to split up. Story 41. We took a boat to an island off the coast and my wife got seasick. Her dad called us a helicopter, which arrived in about 20 minutes when it was time to go back. He never has to find parking at hotels, as they usually ask him to park his car right in front of the lobby so people see it when they arrive or walk past. I guess it makes the hotel look elite. We also meet public figures, politicians, designers, and business people casually and quite often at events, parties, and clubs. In his world, you feel like the person at the front desk of your building would literally go to war for you. One last thing that shows up when someone really grew up with money, my wife couldn't give less of a crap if people knew she has money or not. She makes zero attempts at flexing, ever. Story 42. Vetted waitstaff for parties. Some of the horse farms around here host parties with all sorts of celebrities and political figures in attendance, including Middle Eastern oil billionaires. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia visits every year for the spring yearling sales for thoroughbred horses. Consequently, these parties have different levels of security for the waitstaff. Kitchen staff can never leave the kitchen area. Porter staff can only bus food from the kitchen to the waitstaff. Waitstaff take the food to the tables. Cocktail staff can move among the guests and speak with them as needed. You need to work these parties for several years before you are trusted enough to work the party rooms. You are vetted by private security teams. I talked to one person who confirmed that these checks are far more intrusive than government security checks for spy agencies. Since they are private, they don't have to worry about being sued in the same way, so questions about your gender preferences, history, and personal life are all on the table. You can and will be sued if you reveal anyone you see at these parties. Story 43. I live near one of those private walled towns where the ultra-rich build their summer mansions. Back then, I worked for the National Mail Delivery Company. When I found an opportunity to move to my actual hometown, I gave it a try. Not only did they give me the position, but I actually got a raise and was given that specific sector to manage. It was a surprisingly normal place. The people seemed down to earth, the servants were friendly, and the weirdest things that happened were along the lines of someone's granddaughter visiting and bringing along her entire swarm of chihuahuas. I commented on this to a coworker and he told me that I only had this experience because I'm a man. They gave me the position because I was the only guy in the office who speaks English. My female coworkers also spoke English, but in that town they were treated like gold diggers who would supposedly cry with joy at the chance to sleep with those same down-to-earth guys. For them, delivering a random Amazon package was a 20-minute process of dodging advances from men who weren't even angry at being rebuffed. They were just utterly confused that a commoner wouldn't simply obey their commands. Story 44. My husband's cousin owns a contracting company and does work for a hardware store billionaire. One day, he was out there coordinating a project when the job site trucks started arriving to deliver materials. They were all Chevys and the billionaire didn't like it, so he called the company and yelled at them. The next day, only 4 trucks came out. He also went looking for a new car one day and walked into a dealership. This guy wears blue jeans and polos every day. He could walk into any one of his stores and no one would even know it was him. The people at the dealership treated him like crap because they didn't think he could afford a car, so he bought the dealership. Another time, he went to one of his stores early in the morning. They were supposed to be open, but they hadn't unlocked the doors yet, so he drove his truck into the doors. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.